Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to tackle a pretty brutal truth about business strategy. Look, if you're feeling resistance in your operations right now, you might think you have a growth problem. But the reality? Most businesses don't actually have a growth problem at all. What they really have are unclosed operational gaps that have simply never been priced.
To understand why this happens, we have to look at the status quo of what we like to call a foggy company. In a foggy company, well, everything just feels important. That recurring meeting feels important. An old process feels important. That extra report or legacy software tool you guys barely use, they survive simply because they feel familiar. They're just part of the process. You get this illusion of productivity, where a step that merely exists is automatically assumed to be useful. And that brings us to a core thesis we really need to sit with for a second. Most businesses do not lack strategy. They lack valuation. Because everything feels so important in the fog, nothing actually gets valued. And this lack of valuation allows things that quietly burn money to survive right there, hidden in plain sight. You keep steps because we've always done it that way. And you fund assets because, they should pay off eventually. But feeling important is not proof of value.
So we have to completely shift our perspective. We've got to stop asking if a meeting, a tool, or a role merely exists and start asking the brutal, unadulterated adult question, what does this actually produce? Without this level of strict valuation, your business is just carrying the heavy weight of steps that were never actually forced to justify themselves.
Enter the -1 concept. This is an absolute forcing function. When promised value is missing, and that missing value triggers a strict financial penalty, like a negative price where the seller actually pays the buyer, everything changes overnight. Suddenly, vague activity is no longer acceptable. The fog instantly lifts. Because when missing value has a real, tangible consequence, you are forced to price reality immediately. You just can't hide behind assumptions anymore.
Under a -1 standard, your workflow fundamentally transforms. It stops being this simple checklist or a loose sequence of tasks, and it becomes a strict value pipeline. In this pipeline, every single action, every handoff, every tiny delay has a real cost and a real time tag attached to it. The workflow literally must prove itself.
Which brings us to a frankly terrifying truth for a lot of legacy businesses out there: slow is not neutral. Now, before 1.1, slow could be tolerated, right? But in this new reality, slow increases misses, and misses trigger penalties. Time instantly becomes your most critical currency. Every single minute of delay either protects quality or it actively destroys trust and increases your risk of a penalty.
It boils down to this. Every single step in your workflow is revealed to be strictly one of two things. It is either an investment that actively increases value, or it is a tax that burns it. There is absolutely no neutral ground here, forever. If a step isn't moving you closer to delivering the promised value, it is actively acting as a tax on your entire business.
Unpriced work is what we call silent failure. And it's incredibly dangerous exactly because it feels so harmless. A 5-minute delay here, an unread report over there, a quiet handoff that fails subtly. None of it looks dramatic on its own, but together it creates silent failure. You won't notice it immediately, but margins shrink, talent leaves, support loads rise, and customers quietly churn.
Section 1. Exposing low ROI resources.
To stop this silent failure, we have to expose those low ROI resources. In the old world, these survive for years behind convenient excuses. You know the ones, it's strategic, it's complicated, or we'll optimize that later. But the -1 standard makes that sacred waste mathematically visible. The math forces you to ask deeply uncomfortable questions. You have to look at your organization and ask which roles actually protect the promise and which roles just generate rework, which assets actually produce value, and which are just expensive comfort blankets. These questions definitely threaten habits, but they are the only path to real strategic improvement.
Section 2. The Step Valuation Map.
To actually fix this practically, we don't evaluate the whole business at once. That would be completely overwhelming. Instead, we apply a strategic framework to a single recurring workflow step, like a specific handoff, a recurring meeting, or an approval process. This step valuation map strips away all that fog by forcing you to rigorously measure every single step against 5 brutal dimensions: cost, time, value, risk, and ultimately, the decision.
First up, you must price the true cost in the real time. For cost, it's not just labor and software. No, you have to price management attention, the cost of error correction, cognitive load, and even the depletion of customer patience. And for time,
You cannot use the optimistic version. You must measure the reality, the prep work, the waiting around, the execution, and the actual delay created for the very next step in the pipeline. Next, you've got to evaluate value and risk. Ask yourself, does this step actively increase value? Does it improve quality, catch problems early, and protect trust? Or does it leak value and create risk? Does it confuse the customer, add ambiguity, rely on someone's memory, or just create unnecessary bottlenecks? A step that adds complexity without protecting the outcome is a massive, massive risk.
Once you have those measurements dialed in, you finally make a decision, and there are only a few options here. You keep it if it clearly adds value and reduces risk. You standardize it if it works but relies way too much on improvisation. You automate it if it's strictly rule-based. You redesign it if there's too much friction, and you absolutely ruthlessly delete it if it costs more than it returns.
Now, to be clear, valuation is not measurement theater. We aren't doing this to create some bureaucratic tracking system for every tiny action or cutting everything just to be cold and mechanical. Not at all. It is entirely about gaining strategic clarity. It's about knowing exactly which steps deserve absolute protection because they protect value and which steps deserve elimination because they are just a tax on your business.
Section 3, the discipline.
This strict valuation methodology isn't just theory, by the way. It is perfectly embodied in a concept called Negbook. It's actually the world's first book with a negative price standard. The principle of Negbook is brilliantly simple. Either you read the book and it helps you, or you read the book and it pays you. This is the -1 visual hammer in action. When the seller carries the absolute consequence of missing value, they are forced to intimately understand what each step consumes and exactly where value leaks. It proves that -1 is not just some clever pricing trick. It is a true, rigorous business discipline.
So what is the practical next step for you and your business? It's called the -1 Diagnostic. This diagnostic helps you examine whether a controlled negative price pilot could actually work on one of your real offers without gambling your whole company overnight.
Listen, you absolutely cannot just slap a -1 guarantee on an unpriced workflow. That would be completely reckless. You must first follow this exact sequence. Price the steps, expose the leaks, fix the low-value parts, rigorously protect the high-value parts, and only then do you decide what consequence you are actually willing to carry. You are forcing every single part of the operation to justify itself before you ever make a promise.
If you are tired of sitting in meetings hearing, "Yeah, we'll optimize that later," while your margin quietly slips away, do not start with another motivational slogan. Start by pricing the workflow. You can apply for the diagnostic today at negbook.com/negative price standard. It is time to replace assumptions with hard numbers. Because when you finally price reality, you realize there is absolutely no room for sacred waste. A step that cannot explain how it protects value should never be protected by habit. So take a really hard look at your own workflows today. What outdated processes are you protecting that are quietly taxing your success? Stop protecting the fog. Let the math do the talking. Every step must earn its place.